Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, whatever platform you listen to us on, wherever in the world you are listening to us from. As always, greatly appreciate your support. Today's episode is going to be talking about winning, but in a different sense of the term. We're all coaches here. We all know how important the win-loss column is to our program, but I think all of you listening also want to win the right way. Not just win for the sake of winning, but doing it the right way where you and your program can hold its head high. So today we're going to talk with a guest who has really embodied that mindset of winning, but winning with high character and achieving victories that go beyond the box score and beyond just the win-loss column that you might see online or in the newspaper. My guest today, it would take me a while to go through all of this person's resume, but is a recipient of the Glastonbury Public School Teacher of the Year Award, basketball coach at Glastonbury High School, as well as a co-founder of The Winning Difference, which is what we're going to get into today. Very happy to be joined by Coach Rob Rose. Coach, thank you so much for taking some time to discuss The Winning Difference with us today. How are you?
I'm living the dream. Thank you, Coach Hernandez. I appreciate the platform to speak.
And I appreciate you being willing to, because I think that this is something that really needs to really be amplified and shared with as many people as possible. So really looking forward to it. As I alluded to, we could probably spend an hour just talking about all the things that you've done and currently do. But Coach, go ahead and get us started with kind of the introduction to yourself and kind of what kind of led you to becoming one of the co-founders of The Winning Difference. What was the journey that led up to that point?
Sure. Much like yourself, I'm an English teacher, and that started my kind of career in education. And, that took me into coaching basketball. I played my whole life through high school and loved the game incredibly. And I've been fortunate enough to coach over 20 years now. I started coaching at the freshman level in Litchfield, Connecticut. That transitioned when I transitioned to teaching in Glastonbury. I was able to get a coaching job there at the JV level. And now currently I'm an assistant with the varsity team, and I love that position. I get the opportunity to work with all three levels, which to me is the best part about it. My co-founder of The Winning Difference, Mark Landers, he's also an English teacher, also a coach at Glastonbury. He's been there 27 years. He coaches the boys soccer program, and he's been incredibly successful there, including being, nationally ranked by USA Today. He's only the fourth coach in program history. But what came about for it is we sat down and we understand, as you said, there is a value to winning. But for both of us, despite any successes we've seen, it cannot be at the cost of learning and growing. And we became alarmed as we started to see a shift happening where it became about victories over values or statistics over standards. And that kind of led to us sitting down and developing this kind of concept. And for us right now, it's this kind of non-sport specific platform. And the only goal is to spotlight players, programs, coaches that are kind of demonstrating principles of what we call championship character. To reinforce the idea that character counts not only in sports, but in life. And, we look at some numbers, although I'm an English teacher, I guess I have to look at numbers every once in a while.
Sure.
The NCAA in 2019 came out with a study, and it just kind of hit us very hard when we looked at it. 45 million kids play youth sports. That number dwindles down to 8 million who get the opportunity to play at the high school level. Then you go on to the college level, which includes Division I, Division II, and Division III. That's 450,000 kids. And then from there, 9,600 get to do this, are blessed enough to do this at the professional level. So, we just started dialoguing, like sports are most likely not going to be the future career for the kids that we're working with on a daily basis. But if sports are used in the right way to enhance and encourage the development of character, they most likely will influence their future career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such an interesting point when you kind of bring the numbers into perspective like that, to think of how many kind of go from, the millions to then the dwindling who are doing it professionally. But all those, like you said, the millions who do it, there's so much that they take away from it, and there's so many lessons that they can take away, and hopefully they're positive ones. But as I'm sure we'll get into, sometimes we know that isn't always the case with their experience playing sports.
Yeah.
So let's kind of go into what you and your co-founder and what you've kind of noticed as the state of character, and what you see in terms of character development in high school sports right now. When you kind of look at the landscape, or looked at the landscape, what have you kind of noticed in terms of the character development that's being taught for young athletes?
Sure. We have a lot of lunches together. We both teach at the middle school. And it was we found it being a point of discussion over and over. And it turned from a point of discussion to a concern for Coach Landers and I. And we started to look into it. Like, what are things that are out there? You have a wonderful, the PCA, the Positive Coaching Alliance, which is out there, which does great things with this. And then we started to look into some of the research that's out there on character building through sports. And one of the studies that really stuck with us was done at Michigan State. I'm going to say Sarah Carson and Dan Gould, I think, are the two that did it. And they focused on this, what they call PYD, positive youth development. And ultimately, through all the numbers, what the summary of it is it shows character building does not develop through participation in sports. So just because kids are playing sports, it doesn't mean they're getting the results of building character, right? It's same thing in teaching when we say they're not learning through osmosis, right? They actually have to be taught something. Right. So, what they found was the outcome is based on how the sports experience is structured for that particular athlete. And that's when Coach Landers and I kind of spitballed some ideas. Like, we understand coaches have this pressure to win. I mean, if you look at what Coach Landers has with the soccer program, they've had incredible success. Every year they are expected to compete for a state championship, every single year. And those pressures of expectations, those come from, depending on where you are, could be administration, could be athletic directors, parents, players. And that pressure leads coaches to focus on, just sports specific skills, learning the plays or systems you're in, or physical fitness. Right. And it's understandable. I mean, in Connecticut, we have limited access to players at the high school level. We can only work with our kids specifically on skills in the 3 months that we have them. Outside that time, we can do conditioning and things like that, but we can't do any basketball related things.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they're feeling this pressure. They don't have time, as they might think, to develop character very well. But what our claim would be is, first, there has to be an understanding and a patience for building a culture and a program. We can't sacrifice long-term goals of building characters in our athletes for the short-term results of getting a win. And, it's really important to develop these highly talented players, but it's more important to develop high character human beings. And, with the success that Mark has had, he'll be the first one to argue a championship team is built on a foundation of championship character. When you look at the 10 principles that we discuss in the Winning Difference, they're not just attributes of great people. They're attributes of great players, great athletes.
Yeah.
So, for us, we found many high school coaches felt too much pressure on time and couldn't develop character because it just added to that stress. But also, we found when we spoke to some coaches, it was assumed that it was done somewhere else. And we found it was assumed it was done at school. Oh, yeah, they get those character buildings at school. Well, they do, but it's a different setting. Or it's done at the youth level. Yes, but remember, those coaches change from year to year, and they might be getting different messages. So really, that concern turned into, well, what can maybe we do about it to help that out?
And we're gonna get into here the idea of the winning difference, because I know difference is an acronym. So we're gonna go ahead and kind of touch on that, because there's a lot of real good nuggets in that. So it's funny, we kind of talked about off air, like, what do I call the winning difference? And I like the idea of calling it kind of like a platform, because it really is. In your website at thewinningdifference.org is really awesome, and has some really good stuff and really good information to look at. And one of the things I noticed right away is, as I was looking through it, is this acronym of difference that was there. So I know that there's a lot of tenets to it. So can you kind of explain where the acronym kind of difference and the different words kind of came from, and why those were so important to you guys for success on and off the court?
Oh, absolutely. So, of course, being English teachers, we had to do some sort of wordplay in some way to kind of make it memorable. But Mark and I have also found that sort of thing is successful with our players. It helps them remember and recall those sort of things. So doing something like creating this acronym really helps with that. But we also sat down and we started to brainstorm qualities in successful teams we've had, successful players, and both being teachers, successful students, right? And we started to think about, well, what does that entail? What did this have? Many times coaches will talk about their championship team isn't always their most talented team. And I know for us specifically in the basketball program, that's happened multiple times for us. Some of our best seasons were not our most talented teams, but they displayed these sort of characteristics that, yes, they had talent, obviously, but these characteristics push that talent to a whole new level.
So go ahead. I didn't want to cut you
off.
So
I was going to, your question on the acronym itself. There's a lot here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's 10 letters. So, we have the same thing embodied in our logo. If you look at our logo, we have those 10 wings to kind of help people remember that there's 10 different letters to it. And the first one, is discipline. And this is one we actually speak on and talk to players about probably the most, because we use the word discipline and they immediately go to consequence.
True. Yeah.
And for us, that's not even anything remotely to what we're trying to discuss, right? For discipline, we're talking about commitment, accountability, and sacrifice, when you think about playing a role and things like that on a team. So we actually find that that's one that comes up quite often in discussions with players, like, what does that really mean in terms of discipline?
Yeah.
The I is integrity, right? We all talk about that concept, right? Doing what's right without knowing the sort of reward or consequence that might. And the other day we were doing a talk, and Mark just randomly threw out the concept. He's like, there may not be a me in team, but there's an I, and it's integrity. And that kind of just hit home for us, right?
Like
that idea of that there is an I, it's integrity. All right, let's run with that,
Yeah, sure.
But I think, so much of this, if you just use that word integrity and teach kids what that really means, that's a lesson that is going to live with them on the court, off the court, and way beyond the last whistle that they hear. So F is focus, obviously the ability to, concentrate on the task at hand, but also, be present. Wherever your feet are, that's where your head should be. They hear that all the time. But at coaching the high school level, that's really hard for kids. I think
100%.
I think we miss that as coaches sometimes, how impacted they can be. They failed a math test that they studied for. They just broke up with a significant other. There's home issues going on, and we have to look at that focus and have that discussion, not just assume, where are you, where's your head, and start yelling at them, but, have that conversation with them, like, hey, where are you right now? What's going on? And present that comfortability of them being able to understand, okay, my feet are here, my head should be here. It's not, let me go talk to coach before practice, that kind of idea.
Yeah, it'd be really good to have that rapport with your players, so they feel comfortable telling you about that, even in advance about, they're just not with it today or something's going on. I like that a lot.
E, effort. I think we all talk about, determination, will to succeed, that sort of thing. But we try to get into the idea of putting forth a consistent effort. What Mark and I have seen regularly is kids can give you that effort for, 40 minutes of practice, but can they do it for the hour and a half? Or they can give you that effort on defense for, half of the possession. And then all of a sudden, well, I'm going to turn my head, or I'm going to reach, or I'm going to go for the steal so I can stop playing defense. So what does it mean to give a consistent effort? Again, on the floor, and also, in the classroom or at your job or whatever you're doing. Respect is the R for us, right? And we really talk about respect being a display of love and acceptance for others.
Yeah.
Right? And I think when you put it that way, and you put it on respecting others, and then, using that as a mirror, right? If you respect others, that's a mirror showing that you respect yourself. E, enthusiasm. This is one of Coach Lander's favorites, right? Sharing of energy and passion, but the idea of, kind of ties into respect, but being excited for others. That's really hard for kids, is to understand, the ego part of the brain says, but it's supposed to be about me.
Yeah. It's a lot of emotional intelligence and whatnot at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not developed.
It's tough. Exactly. Right.
So it's certainly something we have to teach. So when coaches look down their bed, slumped over or head in their hands, or they're not into the game, teach it. Talk about how they can have an influence on the game, or how being engaged that way will help someone else on the floor. But it's hard. It's hard to be enthusiastic for others. And, some of the things that we've built off of is trying to teach kids, what does that look like? What does that sound like? And how can you do that on a regular basis and actually mean it?
Yeah. It has to be modeled, I'm sure.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. No excuses is our end. We cheated there, right? We took a 2-word phrase there. But, embracing challenges, seeking opportunities for success. We talk a lot about focusing on what you can control. There's a lot out of your control in the realms of sports. The referees, the conditions, if you're playing, soccer with Coach Landers, or the fans, those sort of things. But if you focus on what you can control, right, then you don't have an excuse, right? You can always make an excuse for something out of your control. But if I'm focusing on my effort, my enthusiasm, my communication, well, then I don't have an excuse, because it is within my control to do those things. The C is communication, right? We talk about connecting with others and being connected with others. And generally we work on discussing, verbal, how do you talk to players, right, to get the best out of them, or nonverbal, right? Body language is so important in, communicating with others. What we say is less than half of what people intake from our body language.
And I always say that kids, especially teenagers, and that they see everything and they notice everything, especially what we don't say, just what we communicate just with our gestures and our body language.
Absolutely. And I think as a young coach, that was one of the hardest things for me to understand, putting my head in my hands and right after I tell the kid, that's okay, you'll get it next time. And then shaking my head is, I had to go, oh, wait a minute. That was kind of contradicting. I don't think he got the message I actually really did intend to say.
Oh, but he saw you. He saw that message.
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely.
And then last we have, execution, doing small things that matter, that help to create some sort of impactful habit that you have.
And so with this, let's just say we have a coach listening. Hopefully there's multiple ones who listen to this and they're on board. And they're like, you know what, this is something that I really think our program could benefit from, and that we, really need to, make this a thing of importance for our program. Now, if a coach would like to really kind of go about kind of implementing these principles and really kind of shift their focus and think more about the big picture, about the acronym that you just described, how would you recommend a coach kind of go about building a program that kind of embodies the elements of that difference acronym? I'm assuming this is not something you can just, throw up on a board in August, like, all right, they got it and we're good to go. So what would you recommend for a coach who's looking to kind of shift their program this way?
You're absolutely right. This is not a poster. It can't be a poster in your locker room. It's got to be something that, as you said, you do, you practice, you preach, you teach, those sort of things. But for us, we would recommend as we stated earlier, coaches are always concerned about practice time or time during the season.
Mhm.
In most states, you can have contact with your kids in the off season, but you can't do any sports specific things. So, why not do this? This is the time for character building, right? This is the time to get together, to share videos, to have these discussions, to look at readings, to maybe have a team book that you're going to work from.
Mm.
And then have those discussions about these concepts. And then when you come into your season, your kids are familiar with the verbiage, they're familiar with the concepts. And I think, for all of us, if coaching during the pandemic did anything, it taught us there's ways to learn and grow together without being on the court. These could be, Zoom meetings, these could be Google Hangouts, this could be through, Google Classroom, that you have these meetings, that you have these discussions. So that's certainly one way that we think it's a great way to spend off-season time.
Yeah.
And as you said, you got to start small. You can't walk in day one with, as you said, the 10 principles on the wall and say, this is what matters to us now. Right?
Sure.
That's not authentic. It's not realistic. And as you just stated, if you're not authentic and realistic, the kids don't care.
Mhm.
Right? So we would suggest you present the foundation of the program. Like, let's get them familiar with the 10 words, but you're going to focus on the few. And that's what we kind of love on this,
Mm.
is it's got to be fluid. Find what's relevant and necessary for your program at that specific point in time. Although it is an acronym, it's nothing that was ever intended to be designed to be, okay, we're starting with number 1, we're going to number 10.
Yeah.
So you have to examine your team. I think of some of our teams in the past. We've had some, 7 or 8 seniors in some years, but really talented sophomores, juniors, freshmen that might actually be starting over some of these seniors who have put in 4 years. So if I'm thinking about the winning difference, I might start my season with, the word discipline, and focus on playing a role, and how playing a role is really essential for a team to be successful. And that role doesn't always mean you're the starter. It doesn't always mean you're getting half the playing time you expected, but you can still really help the team be successful. I might focus on fortitude, looking at, how do I recover from something I wasn't expecting? I was expecting, I put in my time, this is my senior year, I'm going to be a starter, I'm going to be all league. And all of a sudden there's, a junior that's starting over me. There's choices you have to how to react, and as we said, like enthusiasm, here's a perfect time to say, look, I know it's my senior year, and if I am an enthusiastic teammate, a relentless teammate here, I have the ability to go out as a champion with my team. Is playing 15 minutes instead of 25, but growing as a group and building a foundational championship that my program might go on to, always look back on as that's when it all started. So, you really have to take these ideas and look at them as, what do I pull from? I'm going to pull from this, this, and this for right now, because that's what my team needs. And that's kind of what they'll benefit from. The other way is kind of, as with teaching, is scaffolding. If your town has youth programs or middle school programs, you can start there. Think of, we mentioned, development. It's hard for, a young kid, maybe even a freshman or 8th grader to think about, discipline, fortitude, and execution. So maybe at the youth levels, you start with effort, focus, and respect, getting those down there, building those foundations. And then as you get to the freshman level, you might look at communication and integrity and no excuses. And JV could be discipline and fortitude. Varsity, then you've got execution and enthusiasm. You don't ignore the other ones, but they're not your primary focus for that season. You teach the others, you mention the others, but these are your fundamental principles that you're building upon.
And I think one of the things that is really important to make this work, and this is just me kind of doing a little bit of reflection, is as a coach, you yourself have to make sure that you're following through on this, that you can't just be kind of throwing this and saying, this is what all of you guys do, but don't watch what I do, because I might not be doing this at all. I feel like it's really important for a coach to believe in it to the point where they're willing to be held accountable by their staff and by their players to make sure that they're doing it as well.
100%. 100%. And for instance, we talk no excuses or perhaps discipline, however it is. that's one of my things, right? I have to focus on, not getting caught up in a bad call or things like that, and moving on, because exactly as you say, if I'm not doing it, if I'm not modeling it, right, I can preach it, I can teach it, but if I'm not doing it, none of that matters.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that it would be a really good idea then for a coach to even think about like where they're at with these particular ones, and are there certain things that maybe they want to focus on for themselves, and they're gonna, maybe let's say I'm just picking up ones, maybe for their team they want to really focus on like fortitude and effort and focus, and as a coach maybe they want to focus on those as well, but then maybe a coach has one like enthusiasm that they're gonna kind of keep tabs on a personal level as well. I feel like there's a lot of room in this where like you said, you don't need to just throw on we're going 1 through 10 on a checklist, but you can kind of make it work for your program. And I feel like this is also a really good thing for coaches just to kind of look at their program and just kind of almost rate themselves, or maybe have the team even rate
Yeah.
themselves and see like, hey, like where do we think we're at on these different ones, and almost kind of in a way like kind of come up with it together. I'm just kind of spitballing ideas here.
No,
Let's go taking this all these directions.
absolutely. And in fact, our girls basketball program did something similar. They took
Really.
kind of an inventory
That's
of
a good
where they
term.
were. And I was really impressed. What they did is they took the words that they all felt they need to work on, and they wrote it on a piece of duct tape, and they taped it on the floor every time they had a game. And they actually taped it in the exact spot where the timeouts take place.
Mm.
So as the girls were sitting, they saw these words that they kind of want to reinforce every single time right there on the floor in front of them. And I thought that was really cool. And then the coach, as they essentially mastered these techniques, would take it and bring it up to the locker room and try to introduce something else.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's really what do we call that in teaching? Mastery, right? Hitting that mastery level on it. I think that's awesome. That's some real buy-in there. Um, so in situations like this where coaches are really trying to shift how they view winning and really focus on the character elements of things, I know one of the tricky parts to this is a coach may be really on board with the tenets of things like the winning difference, but they might not have that reciprocated by the other teachers or coaches or admin in the building. They might be more results driven, and they might think it's just, whatever, this is just a bunch of nonsense, who cares? What advice would you give to a coach who feels like they're just kind of going about this alone in their program, and that message isn't really being broadcast or reciprocated by kind of anyone else in their school?
Yeah, I'm going to half-heartedly start with change schools. Um,
There
if
you
you're
go.
not at a program that doesn't want to prioritize the development of young men and women over winning, is that the program you want to represent? And I kind of say that half-heartedly, but mean it in some sense of the word as well. Um, so when you ask the question, you kind of, originally worded it like being on an island by
Yeah,
yourself, and kind of that made me reflect to really when Mark and I started this,
sure.
right? Because we felt like we were in the minority, placing an emphasis on character building over championships. We would see teams and coaches in the area and in the media praised for winning while they were ignoring things like sportsmanship and character in class. You'd watch the behavior of some of these athletes or coaches or programs, and you're like, that's what is being celebrated right now. So for us, right, we looked at, exactly what you're saying here. What can we do about it? Right? Because so this platform that was created, right, we had this overwhelming response from coaches. So I think the first thing that I would suggest to those coaches is you're not alone, right? Mark and I felt at times we were, but we're not, right? There's this desire and need for positivity and for spotlighting programs that are building these athletes.
Yeah,
And, look at other coaches. I mean, to these coaches, like, first, have the confidence that you're doing what's right, right?
yeah, that's a good
You know,
point.
John Wooden, right? Everyone looks at Wooden, his 10 championships in 12 years. He was there 10 years before he won his first championship.
Hmm.
He was building a culture. He was building a program. This is a guy who in preseason taught his kids to put their socks on. The first practice was putting on socks to avoid blisters, because he would say, you're no good to me if you get blisters on your feet. You can't play at that level. and this is regarded as one of the best coaches ever. So if you have people that aren't supporting you, you're doing the things that count, right? Small things matter. The details determine the outcome, so revisit these things, look at these things, and be relentless in emphasizing the whys. Right? Teaching kids to be respectful and have integrity is doing it right. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter how much support you have within that particular program.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing the right thing. And if you're kind of looking for a checklist, staff, if you don't have the people around you that are supporting you, seek out new staff. Surround yourself with people who have similar philosophies and who have similar values. As you said, if your players aren't seeing it, it doesn't matter. You also hinted, at getting the buy-in from the players.
Yeah.
Being clear and consistent with your expectations. Have your players help define the expectations, right? We kind of define some of these words, but that's our definition. That's not what your players have for a definition or your team has for a definition.
Yeah, sure.
And once they've done that, if they're part of it, they're able to hold each other accountable for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then lastly, I would say if your support system isn't in your school, there are other coaches out there, other local coaches, other coaches, maybe they're not basketball coaches, but they're football coaches or soccer coaches or gymnastic coaches, right? And then, what we found is social media, right? It's amazing what some coaches are doing out there. And, you discover that through going out into social media, listening to podcasts like yours, you're kind of reaffirmed in that fact. And you go, okay, I get that not everyone's on board, but I also get that this is right.
Yeah. And I can imagine that it's really important with the point that you just brought up for coaches to realize that, or they see that on social media and connect with those who believe that, especially the ones who are in like real, like high stakes, high stressful situations. My mind just keeps going to, stereotypical like Texas high school football, that sort of situation where there's just so much, going on that it could feel like, you're the only voice in the room that's really, emphasizing, these sort of things. And, like we talked about, I'm sure that there's other coaches and other people at specific programs who think that those are important, but maybe aren't emphasizing them as much as, maybe a coach is really trying to. So, I mean, as teaching and even coaching can be like a really isolating profession at times. So connecting with those kind of a similar mindset can probably, like you said, just kind of reaffirm that you're doing the right thing, because as sometimes, and I'm sure you can speak to this, that I'm sure there's programs who maybe they're not having tons of success on the win-loss column, but they're being really successful in the tenets of, the winning difference. And I think it's really important to celebrate those victories as well, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, those are the largest victories.
Yeah.
When you see what your players accomplish after leaving your program, the longer I've coached, the more I've realized that, staying in touch with all these kids, or kids reaching out back to me and saying, hey coach, remember this? Oh yeah. And by the way, here's what I'm doing now. And here's, blah, blah. I mean, that's what it's about.
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. And I think that's what you get from, building on those tenets and all of the things that we just kind of talked about. I think I've mentioned before, and I've heard other coaches say, your players, when they look back in their high school career, probably won't look at that great out of bounds play that you drew up. They probably won't remember that too much as they will, the other lessons that you taught them, for sure.
Some of my players don't remember those out of bounds plays in the moment, afterwards. So.
Oh, that's well, I can say that you're not alone in that. A little bit of a curveball. This kind of just came up to my mind though right now. What has your experience been with the tenets of the winning difference in terms of talking with parents? Have you explicitly talked to parents about this and what the importance is of this? Have parents gotten involved in any way with kind of the message? Have they gotten on board, or what has that been like?
I think it's hard when you're talking to parents for them to say that it's not valuable. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're sitting in front of a parent and you're saying, look, we're not ignoring what you find valuable in terms of, your kid, you're investing money and time in your kid and possibly playing at the next level. But we also have to be realistic. And a lot of times parents do want to get involved. We've had parents even reach out to us, with the winning difference, that don't even have kids and saying, look, I'd love to come talk to these programs about, I played at the college level. I'd love to come in and talk and say how that worked out for me and what I'm doing now in my life. So, I think it's very rare, and we haven't come across it yet, that you have a parent said, no, I don't want my kid involved in character building. Because that's our goal as parents, is to make sure that our kids are, yes, successful in each thing they're doing, but that are going to be long-term successful with whatever they do. And I think recognizing that we can do both, we can have really talented athletes and really good kids. Yeah. I think they realize that.
Yeah, I fingers crossed, fingers crossed as well that is the case. But I think that and we've kind of talked a little bit about it anyway. Like, I think if you embody those sort of principles of discipline, integrity, all the things on there, I think that hopefully, almost in a way without having to explicitly state it, hopefully like the parents kind of like already see it in you, and they already know, like, okay, I know what this person's about. Like, I know that these things are important, that they maybe don't have to necessarily like explicitly say like these words or whatever are important. Like, I can tell by interacting with this coach that they're enthusiastic, they're putting an effort, they're communicating, and I know that they're going to be bringing that to my team as well. It's almost kind of like a understood sort of thing, I think, if you really have a good relationship with parents.
Right. And you want them to realize it's a partnership. I'm not trying
Absolutely.
to teach your kids or of infer you're not teaching your kids these things.
That's a very good point. Yes.
What I want to do is reinforce. So if you come to me and say, he's not studying at home, I need your help. Well, then we turn right to this and we start talking about, are you being disciplined in the classroom? Do you have the integrity of going into that classroom and treating it the same way you treat the court? So if we look at it as a partnership to reinforce each other's values, I think then you're building on that culture and including the parent in that culture and holding them responsible, you responsible, and the child responsible.
And I'm very glad that you mentioned this, because when I was a younger coach, when I first started, I think my communication was a little bit lacking. And I think I tried to communicate a message similar to this. And I specifically remember a parent saying that, coach, it's not your job to raise my child. And it was kind of, it was kind of one of those situations where I don't think I was communicating myself in the best way. And they thought that I was kind of saying that like they were failing as parents and they weren't raising their kids correctly, and I was going to be the one to fix it, which is not at all what I meant. But yes, I'm glad you brought that up, because that could get lost if you're not, stating it correctly.
Absolutely.
Coach, having flashbacks to me as a younger self. That's funny. So of all this great stuff, we kind of touched on it here and there, but let's talk about some success stories or some results that you've kind of seen with either coaches you've talked to, coaches who've implemented these principles, you and your own success. So what are some real success stories and positives here we can share from the winning difference implementation?
So I guess I'd start with, the winning difference being a newly kind of documented concept. Sure. It's long established. Mark and I have done things, and I'll speak on that. But, when I think, and coming to mind, I think of, some coaches at the college and the professional level that if you look at, maybe they're not doing the winning difference, looking at those terms, but they're character first coaches. Sure. Little East Coast bias here. I imagine, Jay Wright at Villanova. And, if you don't know Jay Wright very well, started out at Hofstra. He was a pure X's and O's. He was obsessed with like game strategy and play design, and he had 3 straight losing seasons. And ultimately, he kind of came to this decision that, okay, that's part of it, but I have to develop these young men in the kind of attitude and character that they have, because he started to see like, oh, wait a minute, they hit a last second 3-pointer and we just unravel, or we're fighting with each other, we're showing up late to practices. And when he got to Villanova, I want to say 2001, if I'm correct, that became his main focus. Right. My wife is a Villanova grad, so I've had the opportunity to kind of walk to the gym, and he has, slogans everywhere on the wall. I'm trying to think of the one that sticks out to me. Players play for their teammates and coaches, actors play for the crowd, just like things like that, that he started building these concepts. And you know, if you look at his system now, he's not a ton of X's and O's. He's actually a ton of freedom to the players in terms of the motion offense that he runs, and he has confidence in their choices and knows their kind of character. And one story that always sticks out with me is that 2016 national championship. They ended up winning. I think halftime they were down 5 to North Carolina, and I've heard an interview with him where he says, you know, he met with his assistants, and they're about to go right into that locker room, and they were going to fire everybody up and get them going. And the second he got to the door, one of his seniors, Daniel Chefu, says, "No, coach, we got this." And he kind of just staring at him, and his assistants are going, "Oh no, you don't. We've got this. We're going in there." Right. The assistants are trying to get him in there. And you know, Jay Wright is sitting there, and he said, I literally have this like out of body experience of what do I do? I've taught these kids like all this character and that I trust them and then da-da-da-da-da. And he didn't go in. He didn't go in. He didn't speak to those kids at halftime because he trusted in their ability to lead one another, to have this championship character. And you know, if you know it at all, that's they hit the last second jumper. That's Chris Jennings wins the national championship.
Yeah.
And they interviewed Chefu at the end, and he's kind of laughing at it. He's like, "Look, when I got there, I laughed at Coach Wright. You know, he's wearing these bracelets that say humble and hungry, and he's got these quotes everywhere." And he goes, "In the biggest moment of my career, I turned into him. You know, I was building these guys' character. I was trying to get them motivated." So, you know, like those sort of stories that you see where you listen to these players being successful at that level and these coaches, you know, they're character first guys. I've been following incredibly closely with Monty Williams right now, and you know where you are, I'm sure you're quite familiar with him.
Yes, out here in Phoenix, absolutely.
But man, just watching what he's developed with these young kids, and then you watch him on film, and he's not talking X's and O's with them most of the time. You know, it stuck out to me, that conversation he had with DeAndre Ayton sitting there, his you know, his head's in his hands. He's not playing well. He sees a kid who's defeated and not demonstrating the kind of culture of the team. And he doesn't get angry, right? All he says is, he goes, "Look at me." And then that gave me a big flashback as a young coach. I might have taken a different spin on that, but he was confident in the culture and character of his players, and knew he'd respond. So he says, "Look at me." And he looks up and he says, "You set a high level for yourself. You know, that's why you're down right now. Go reach that level." You know, and that kind of concept, or you know, I think of Williams, he did that other side of hard speech that we all saw in the locker room, which is amazing. But as a coach, and now doing this with the Winning Difference, I found myself not watching Williams. I was watching Saric in the background. And if you ever get a chance to watch that clip again, watch him. Or if you as a coach are looking for something for your kids to understand what it means to buy into a culture and have character, his head is down. And the second Williams starts speaking, his head goes up and he makes eye contact. And Williams starts talking about, you know, this is the other side of hard. We got to stay together. What happens is correctable, all those things.
Yeah.
And then you watch Saric, and he just, his eyes light up, and he's nodding intently, and he's buying in 100%. And that only happens when you focused on these kind of culture and character things. And again, you know, last night, I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen an opposing coach do what he did last night. And you talk about setting an example for your team. He walks into the Bucks locker room. He's thankful for the experience. You've made me a better coach. You've made me a better team. Like, talk about being a leader of character and culture. You can't. I woke up this morning and started looking at some of the comments, and I was infuriated as I saw people say, "Well, this is why they lost. He's not a competitor. He's soft."
Oh man,
I couldn't believe it. I was like, no, this is someone who is teaching a lesson that you can respect your opponent and still be a competitor, right? Competition is about self-improvement. It's about searching for something greater than we believe we can be. Like, winning's a result of competition, but it's not your goal for competition. You know, he's modeling that for a young team that's accepted this challenge, and they've grown together. I mean, look at just the success, 34 games in 2019. I think it's 52 games this year. He's building them on character. He's not building them on anything else.
Yeah, I mean, that team in particular, and again, living in Phoenix, I know very well the turnaround here. Somebody who's lived in Phoenix for a few years, didn't hear really anything about Suns basketball, but all of a sudden it's exploded. And yeah, I think Coach Williams is a huge part of that. Just hearing him speak, like you said, is like, oh wow, like it has nothing to do with X's and O's, a lot of this, and it's just you just listen and you know that he's
Right.
authentic. And I think that, as we've mentioned a couple of times, just how authentic it is, like you know that he means exactly what he's saying, and that's just incredibly important to be
Yeah.
respected, I think. Absolutely, for sure. And go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna ask specifically about I know that this has been something with your program and out in Glastonbury that you've believed in, and maybe haven't actually put it into words as, you know, calling it the winning difference necessarily, but what have you kind of seen with your program or with the school in general, by having this point of emphasis in the winning difference? What have you kind of noticed just as a coach, working directly with your high school players?
Yeah, so I actually had the opportunity to be part of, when I first got to Glastonbury, part of, Coach Lander's staff. And, he started coaching, long before I got there. He was, probably 7 years into being the varsity coach, and I had the ability to coach under him at the JV level. And I think that's where this first really started to hit me. Coach Landers is arguably, he wouldn't say this, but one of the most successful coaches in the state of Connecticut, for boys soccer. He's played in 10 state championships in his 21 seasons. He's won 8 out of the 10 he's been in. And it's just like we said, his discussions are not about X's and O's.
Yeah.
They're about building culture and consistency. I hear him say all the time to his kids, any team can win a championship if they have the right amount of talent and the right circumstances. But sustained winning must be about more than talent and tactics. And all he talks about is culture. It's about building a culture. You'll constantly hear him refer to, it's not about you, it's about the kid who wore that jersey in front of you. How are you respecting him? How are you respecting what we've built here?
Wow.
So, being around him for so long and working so closely together, we share these common ideas, and despite different sports now, we share, books, articles, video clips. And even after leaving his staff, I've had the privilege of speaking to his group in the locker room. And this is somebody who's had incredible success at the high school level. And he will tell you, he knows his X's and O's. He's a very great coach. His sideline stuff for soccer is quite incredible. His free kicks, but he'll be the first to tell you, he's not winning because of talent. He has talent. Some of his most talented teams haven't won, but he's winning because he honestly, wholeheartedly believes that it's about culture and it's about character. It's about holding kids accountable for those things. And because he does that, he does have success.
Yeah, that's really well put. And I like that you mentioned the idea of, your most talented teams, like they might not necessarily be, the most successful, and you might have more success in different ways with teams that are less talented. Or, as I'm sure you know, and if you've been around coaching long enough, you've seen teams that on paper may not be as talented, but they buy into a lot of these tenets that we've talked about, and they're able to kind of elevate themselves probably beyond, what teams that maybe are more talented but don't necessarily have that in them, are able to achieve. I can think of teams off the top of my head, as I'm sure you have, teams that seem like they have all of the talent in the world, but just don't really put it together because they're lacking in one or more of those areas, and teams that are maybe overachieve because they really embody some of those tenets that we've just talked about.
Yeah, our first semifinal run was a team that, talent-wise, didn't stack up against most teams. We had a Division III senior who was a great leader. Eventually he was a sophomore at the time. He was a Division I player, but nowhere near where he would have been. And the rest were just role guys. but man, they bought into each other. They bought into playing for each other. They bought into the system. They brought into what we were explaining, the playing roles. And I mean, we had no business beating some of the teams that we did, but we had that fortitude. We had that character that just we're playing for each other, and it made all the difference in the world.
Yeah. And man, what a feeling that is when you step back and think like, whoa, like we pulled that off because of, things that weren't even X's and O's or talents related, but all these other things that we believed in. Oh, that's awesome. I know for a fact we have at least one player. There may be more. I won't call out who it is, but I do know we have at least one player who is listening. And if you were to speak to not just him, but any player who might be listening, or you might be, curious about this thing for active players, what would you tell them about using the winning difference principles in their own lives, and why it would be important for them to really start embodying them and embracing those now at a young age as they start to enter young adulthood or adulthood?
Absolutely. So I think as coaches, we always get the statement, the video doesn't lie.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We can tell a kid something, but until we show them on video, they can deny it all they want. Oh, you're not boxing out enough. No, coach, I'm doing it. And then we show it on video. So I guess the best way for me to explain this to kids is to kind of look at the real evidence, the real hard facts, right? If the only purpose that you're playing sports is for winning, you're going to be continually disappointed. Right? At each level in our state of Connecticut, we have 5 divisions for basketball. Only 5 teams get to end the season on a win. Right? But if you're using sports as a tool to develop relationships, character, confidence, the scoreboard is not the ultimate determination of your success. Right? In 2015, Fortune 500 magazine did a study on CEOs, and they found that 95% of CEOs played high school sports. And then ESPNW built off that study, and they found out in the same year that 94% of CEOs, female CEOs, were former high school athletes, and 52% are former college athletes. So if you look at that, none of these people were hired because they have sports specific skills. I've never gone for a job where they've asked me, how many free throws can you hit? Let me see your handle. What's your shooting ability? How many charges did you take? How many wins did you have in high school or conference championships? Right? It's all about hiring people who are goal orientated, demonstrate leadership, know how to play roles, have teamwork, fortitude, confidence, perform under pressure. You're committed and motivated. They want to know who you are, and they want to know what matters to you as a human being. And that's what your character demonstrates.
Yeah, it's such a really nice way to put it about how in an interview, I guess nobody's going to ask you how many points a game you probably put up when you're going to your office job right after you went to college. But I think what that leads to is just an overall kind of like a bigger point about, as coaches, what we're really kind of in this for, if that makes sense. Like what is our actual reason for coaching? And at least in my view, being able to instill some of the tenets that we've just talked about is really why I got into coaching. And I think that that's kind of helped sustain me and kept me into coaching, because I think personally for me that if all I did care about was wins and losses, I would probably have burned out from this a long time ago. I don't know about you, but that's for me. And I think that caring more about these other things is really what's kind of sustained me. And like I said, kind of really is why I got into teaching and coaching in the first place. And I feel like you probably have to kind of be the same way for this to be as important as it is to you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like with coaching, the highs are never high enough to match how low the lows get, in terms of wins and losses. So you're exactly right. If that's your career is stacking up wins and losses, the burnout rate is going to be way too high.
Yeah, and then that is really a shame as well. It's really a shame. If I understand, as we kind of talked about, you might feel all this pressure and all these other things, but I think it is important just to kind of step back and think like, okay, why am I doing this? Like, what is my overall purpose in doing this? And I feel like this is a really good way also almost to like kind of renew your purpose or kind of renew your focus. And to me, something like this would re-energize me as a coach. I don't know if you've kind of felt that way since you started putting this all together into the platform that you have. To me, it's kind of re-energized me, at least looking at it this way.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of getting pen to paper and organizing it, because, you are in the moment and all these teachable moments pop up, and you're not always organizing for kids in a way that makes sense to them.
Yeah.
Because you're like, wait, that's a teachable moment. That is, and this is about this, and this is about that. But if you have these, and you have at least the jargon and the verbiage that you're going to use, you're consistently throughout your freshman program to your seniors, you're going through the same verbiage, the same ideas, the same basic things that your program has defined, that the kids can learn from.
And that makes me think about like all of these moments that I've probably had throughout my coaching career that I don't remember because I haven't really maybe focused on like those tenets as much, or, wrote those down, or, like you said, these teachable moments. And I think just to spend like a year, writing those down when those victories come, and those, moments of, showing enthusiasm or focus or integrity, and, being able to have those to look back on. I think that would be awesome for any coach to keep track of. That would be a real good thing to keep you going, and kind of remind you, the impact that you're having. So that's a really good thought as well. To wrap up, Coach, there's a couple questions that I ask every guest. So usually I ask coaching moment, but this one's a little unique. So you can kind of choose from whatever field you want: coaching,
Sure.
character counts, winning difference moment, whatever it is you want to do. One of those moments from your career that you think others listening would be able to learn from.
Sure, and I'll address this specifically to players that I think about, and I'll tie it into character as we're talking about the winning difference, right? Our character is who we are and what we represent, and you demonstrate your character on the court, in the classroom, and in the community, of course. But I think for a lot of our players now, what they overlook is how they represent their character online, through emails, in social media, right? I think with the recent shift of the NCAA to name, image, likeness, we have to start having these discussions with our teams and our players. And specifically, a teachable moment for me, I had a young man play basketball for us for 4 years, a really great kid, incredible leadership abilities, unmatched work ethic, but he was an even better football player than he was a basketball player. And being an English teacher, and I had contact with him as a student as well, he came to me and said, Coach, I want to get some of these emails out. I'm getting coaches writing to me. I'd love to contact them and respond. So we sit down, we craft an email, we work on his highlight video, and we're getting ready to send out all his information. And I'm like, okay, you got to open up your personal email, because you cannot get these responses through school. It won't accept, outside emails. And he opens up his personal email, and right in the title of his personal email, inappropriate language, at least one swear at that point. And I'm like, okay. So, I'm not naive as to how kids might speak with one another, being in the middle school and the high school. But, I had to explain to him that this is how you're representing yourself and your character to the coaches you want to play for, or at least currently they want you to play for them. And I, just went through, like, if I got this email, I wouldn't even read it. I wouldn't watch it. The title in your email address, I deleted immediately. And the kid, of course, the kid's horrified. And, he explains, this is my personal email. I never use this. I created it when I was so young. I didn't even think about it. But he didn't consider he was going to hit send. He had never considered what sending an email from an account like that might say about people recruiting him. And he's not alone in this situation. And our players, what they write, what they post, what they share, what they like on social media becomes a part of their character. And, athletes at the college level, we have to now, with name, image, and likeness, they're becoming brands themselves. So even if they're looking at this as their future, athletes at the high school level, they have to monitor their social media to be sure that it represents their true character.
Yeah. And I think that now, and I'm sure you've seen this too, a lot of these kids, their social media profiles go back to, I don't know, probably when they're single digit years old, some of their footprints that they have online, and some of these things that they may have put out there, like you said, when they're like 12, 13 or 14, they might not think about it now, but if it's, as you just kind of mentioned, if you know that any of that is still out there, then there's probably plenty of other players who have a perfectly clean social media profile, and why even, give yourself the headache, right, of having to try and, work through this if that's how a player is kind of presenting themselves. It's a really good point. And I don't think it's one that we, or at least players really think about as much as they probably should, or maybe even coaches are even aware of like what their players might have out there on social media, the ones they're trying to help get into college.
Yeah, and as we've been presenting, we just got back from UConn, and there are a lot of college soccer coaches there in Division I programs. And they're telling us, we have people on staff, their only job is to review these kids' social medias. And we want to make sure that the kid that they're presenting themselves as is the kid that they're also being online. But luckily in this day and age of social media, you also get the opposite of that too. We were lucky enough to be introduced to a story about a kid, Elijah Thomas. He plays for Sheed Wallace Select AAU, and this went viral, so you may even be aware of this. There was a video posted of him cleaning up after an AAU tournament. And because of that video, now don't get me wrong, the kid is talented, but at that point he had no college interests. The video went viral. Cornell contacted him. George Washington reached out to him expressing recruiting interest, and this kid says, you never know who's watching. They've never seen me play a game, but they called me because that's the character they want in their program. So this goes both ways. If you present yourself out there with high character, people are also looking for that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like, I think we kind of always think about social media and all these things as like ways to like get you or out to get you, but absolutely, they could be things that promote all the great stuff that you do as well, and open doors that you never even thought. Like you said, you never know who's watching, and that could be a really good thing too, depending on what you put out there. Absolutely, for sure. Awesome. And then to wrap up, Coach, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox. Feel free to go over if you want. I don't have a timer on you. This is where you can get out closing message, closing thought, kind of a final idea that you kind of want to leave the listeners with. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of open up the floor to you, and you can take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to do it for a shameless plug, except
Let's do it.
It's not what you might expect. So when Mark and I created The Winning Difference, the idea was to feature other people and to kind of spotlight and highlight those other people. And what we started doing is we started doing these kind of program profiles where we were trying to spotlight the good things that are happening out there. We know from just being involved the last 4 months, these concepts and principles are important to programs, coaches, and players out there. And we want people to share that with us in order to inspire others or to show others, hey, here's how you can do it. We've been lucky enough to get some program profiles. If you go to our website, we've done Indiana football. We had a backup quarterback, Will Johns, who talks about execution, and Coach Tom Allen talking about LEO, love each other. We featured George Mason wrestling, and a wrestler, AJ Poindexter, talked about effort. He was, not highly recruited, and his coach, Coach Beasley, talked about being uncommon. We've had a lot of programs profiled, but we want to start profiling more. And unfortunately, what I want to get out there is we don't care what level you're playing at. Mm-hmm. It looks, when you look at it, we've got college Division I programs, Division II, we've got a minor league baseball. That's only because we haven't heard from other programs yet. We want to hear from that middle school program that has something they key in on that they consider the winning difference. We want to hear from that high school program, and we're non-sport specific. It's one of the only platforms where you can look at, Indiana football and then go look at Holy Cross soccer or Holy Cross tennis as well. So, we want to hear from all sports. We want to hear from all levels. Our goal is to spotlight you, show you doing it the right way, getting out in your community, making an impact, choosing one of the winning difference principles and making it stick for your team. And what was the result of that? Really, we want to be that spotlight that shows all the wonderful things you're doing to build character within your program. So my shameless plug is for you to send us or tag us or contact us so we can focus on you.
And let's make sure that we touch that. So for people looking to connect, listeners looking to connect with you guys, what's the best way? How do we get in contact with you? I know how, but how do others get in contact with you?
So you can visit us right through our website. We have the winningdifference.org. You can also email us, right? We simply are the winning difference, right? At gmail.com. And, we also have our social media. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. Those are our two main. We do have small sites on Facebook and on TikTok, but really you can direct message us through Instagram, through Twitter, and we can start the process of getting you guys out there and highlighting what you're doing.
Fantastic. This was great. Coach Rose and Coach Landers, wherever you are. Thank you for spending some time just building the platform that you guys have. And then Coach for spending some time talking to us about the winning difference, about character, and just doing things the right way. I really hope that this is something that really takes off, and all of a sudden, a couple of years from now, I'll be like, oh man, I actually got Coach Rose on here, and look at all the great stuff that's going on now. I'm sure your platform is going to just do great things for a lot of people who connect with you. And like I said, really just kind of embody those principles that are involved in the winning difference. So good luck, Coach, not only with that, but with teaching and all the coaching that you have along the way. This is a pleasure, Coach. Thank you. And for all of you listening, thank you guys so much. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.